Hey, I'm holding an event for the DSA and alright, see you later. Hey, would you like to come to a DSA event at 2 o'clock?
I want to talk about time-energy as the basis of value in terms of making promises. Okay, now I've shown this on screen before, but I've never verbally explained what I'm doing because, as everyone knows, if you've watched any of my videos, I'm always starting in the middle, and that means I don't do things very foundationally. So here we go. This is an E for energy. That is a line through the E because you have to do a line through an E to make a T, right? Yeah. So we have T and an E for time energy. We have a symbol for time energy. Time energy is more important than money. Money is for, the bare necessities and those simple pleasures in life, right? But time energy is the real basis of value. And there you go. That's the symbol for it. The symbol of the thing that none of us have. The symbol of the lack. There you go. Now I've explained it. Can't say I didn't. So if you've seen the time energy essay video that I made, then you already know that I am arguing that time energy is something that comes prior to what we typically call time or energy. That energy without time with the potential for repetition, okay? Not just isolated bits of time, but time with the potential for repetition. That energy without time for the potential of repetition has almost no value. Really no meaningful value in the sense that we're going to be talking about value. Same with time with the potential for repetition would be worthless without energy to do things, right? Under capitalism, we find ourselves all the time with energy without time or time without energy. Well, what is this potential for repetition business? Why is that so important to the analysis? Okay. And I like to use the example of, you can't learn a language on a weekend, not just on one weekend, right? Now, maybe if you were tackling this new language every weekend, maybe. But because your energy comes in bursts without time with the potential for repetition, so that most of the time we aren't able to put in that sustained effort on a routine basis to be able to learn new languages, new skills, to develop personal talents that would make us useful within a community where we find purpose and fulfillment. Time energy is not something that you have right now. Chances are you don't have it. You might have it. Let's just say that you're unemployed. You might have it then. Let's say that you're a dependent and other people make ends meet, leaving you with a lot of time and energy. But the thing is that this is an isolated human that we're talking about in that situation. The isolated human doesn't really have the community of potential recognition and care, or the access to communities of potential recognition and care to bring out the energy in the first place. So you might have plenty of time, but be bored, depressed, miserable, because everybody else is working. There is no lively cultural variety of communities to be able to choose from, to select, to be able to plug into.
I'm here with the local DSA. Would you like to come to a meeting today at 2 p.m.? Oh, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine, totally fine.
Time energy is not the same thing as effort. Time energy is the basis to be able to put effort into something. So we'll use as our example, learning another language. Time energy is a necessary condition for being able to learn another language, but it's not a sufficient condition because time energy is a potential. It's a potential, not an actuality.
Ooh, my name's Dave. I read a lot of books. Ooh.
Suffice it to say if you have time energy, it's nothing unless you put it to use in a sustained manner. The reason I want to tie this into promises is because labor power, what time energy is essentially kind of getting at, labor power is not the same thing as labor. Labor power is sustained effort put into a project. Often, especially under wage labor, under capitalism, that's somebody else's project. Somebody else owns that project. They get to choose where that project's headed. You're essentially, in the labor market, you own basically nothing, and you're looking around, finding a way to be, to put a roof over your head and to be able to secure a steady source of food and, the like. And as a result, you are trading away your labor power to capitalists. This is not the same thing as labor.
Ricardo, Smith, and other bourgeois classical economists had it all twisted with their labor theory of value, which resulted in all sorts of contradictions. Then my ride-or-die homie Marx discovered the true value, forming quality of labor as labor power. Truly a genius move. You see, the worker sells future labor, like assumes the obligation of placing one's personal labor power at the disposal of the capitalist for a certain time, in case of time wages, or for the performance of a certain task, in case of peace wages. Thus, the worker hires out or sells their labor power.
Labor power is labor potential. It's not actualized yet. You sell it in advance. You get paid later. This is almost always how it works. You get paid 2 weeks later. Well, you've been working that whole time. Why are you getting paid later? Because the capital that has built up the means of production where you are exchanging your labor power for wages, that capital was built off of previous labor from other people, or yourself if you've been there long enough, but it was built by other people who themselves sold it and got ripped off in the process. They have no more ownership over this thing that stands over you all. The reason that you are subservient to capital is because you don't have that property yourself. You don't have the means of production yourself. Enough people over time have sold away their labor, competing with one another for these wages, that the capitalist has been able to accumulate those means of production that stand over and above you. It dominates you because of socially necessary labor time. Socially necessary labor time, the average amount of time it takes to do a thing in society, dictates how people value it. Because if it would take me 5 hours to make a meal that could be thrown together pretty fast by someone else, or almost by, like, in society, on average, that meal could be thrown together in 2 hours, but it would take me 5 hours. It's not worth my time energy. It's not worth my time energy because other people who would be paying me to make that food would be like, you're taking way too long for this.
No, for real, just for a real quick second. Like, I worked at Schloxy's Deli one time, and I was so bad at making sandwiches because I just could not memorize all the recipes like on the fly fast enough for them, that they made me the prep cook in the back of the kitchen. And I had to like cut onions all the time and just cry my eyeballs out. It was absolutely miserable.
Y'all like, hurry up!
Hurry up!
I'm trying!
There you go. I could easily pay someone half of what I'm paying you, and they'd be able to make that. So that's why it's socially necessary labor time, that your labor and its potential is measured by. Your potential, what I can do, what I'm able to produce, my value on the market is all dictated by, am I able to live up to the socially necessary average standard of what can be made with some labor potential within a given field. Okay, so obviously when the means of production are highly technological, my bare hands are nothing compared to a factory, unless I'm working in a niche market. There are niche markets where old school tools and handicraft trades are still able to provide goods and services for the wealthy, but that's a luxury market. It's like 5% of the market share. It's not, most of us, we're shopping at Walmart, and Walmart's able to undercut everybody due to a lot of reasons, largely, economies of scale and paying low wages and making people work way too long in the week. And the government subsidizing that with things like food stamps, or in the future, maybe UBI. All of this is just set up to get to the point where promises are value. How are promises a form of value? Labor power is worthless if it's not a promise. Time energy, if you commit it to a cause, if you commit it to a workplace, if you commit it to a community, it is worthless if the community, the cause, or the workplace is not able to rely on you fulfilling the promise. This is why you get paid 2 weeks later. You get paid upon the fulfillment of your promise to work for those 2 weeks. When it comes to community organizing, though, if you're volunteering, you're not being paid. You think that the value is the labor that you produce when you're actually there volunteering. It's not. In a sense it is, but the more valuable aspect is being able to rely on you, to follow through, to be able to say, oh, so-and-so, they're gonna help out on every Wednesday and every Saturday. And then if you actually prove that you're able to, you actually prove that you will follow through on that commitment, on that promise. After a certain point, once that can be taken for granted as a habit, as a practice, once there is trust established, that's when it becomes valuable. It doesn't become valuable until you're reliable. And community organizers know that, especially at the university, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare to get people to even show up. But getting people to show up on a routine basis, you can't get off the ground. You can't get going. Why? The academic calendar, with the unequal throughout the week, sporadically distributed time energy investments across classes that are all on different times of different days, and then you're probably working if you're working, unless you're super privileged. And then you've got, a lot of the more privileged kids, they got their sorority, their fraternity, whatever it might be. And the extracurricular stuff fills out the rest of that calendar pretty quick, but it's all very sporadic. And so there's certain kinds of activities or communities that are very easy access, just kind of always there for you to be able to go invest in. So there are types of party houses, for instance, where no promise of your effort and follow through is really needed. You can kind of just come whenever you're able, and there you go. You have some party friends having a good time, right? But if we're talking about something like a community garden, a sustainable community garden, let's just use that as an example. You showing up 3 times out of the year is not sufficient. In fact, it could even be counterproductive if it gives the organizers the impression that you'll be showing up more. And then you don't. Not only does that sap the energy and the hopes of the organizers and the people who are a part of that community, it also just means that there's no sure way of really planning the future. There's no way of taking you seriously as a reliable contribution to the cause. That promise is so often only secured when there's a profit motive under capitalism. This is why you get paid 2 weeks later. This is why you're not selling your labor, you're selling your labor power and potential. You're selling your power and potential as promise. You're being paid upon fulfillment of the promise. You're not being paid, very rarely are you being paid in advance. This is the way that a society primarily orchestrated around the basis of profit and wage labor transpires. Promises are everything. Is it really a community if the people in the community make commitments and then do not follow through on their promises? If people treat it as kind of a plan B that's always there to fall back on, but my individual self and my personal interest, I'm out in the world doing a lot of different things, and this community over here is something that I partake in kind of whenever I have the time. You're treating it like a consumer. You're treating it like it's a store. You're treating it like it's something you can partake in when you wanna. You're not treating it like it's the primary basis of your life world. Is it really a community if you do not depend on it and it does not depend on you? What are the lines of dependency within the community? What are the lines of dependency and promise? What makes a community? Purpose, shared interest, right? What makes you a member of that community? Is it just the way you feel? Is it just your feels? I feel like I'm a part of this. But are you a part of it? Are you there when others need you? Can they depend on you? If they cannot depend on you, how do you call yourself a community member? I ask these questions because I've tried to organize community and it's hard.
Hey, I'm holding an event today at the Quad. We're going to be talking about Timenergy, and we're going to be, okay, no, that's cool. Yeah, no, I understand.
It's really hard. And I am not convinced that you can just make community out of nothing anymore. Not if you're trying to do something outside of capitalism. Not if you're trying to do something outside of a profit motive. Not if you don't have money to pay people. If you have the wages to pay people to do things in a sustained manner. Let's say you have a church. It makes enough money through tithes to be able to pay deacons, you've got secretaries, you've got organizers, whatever. You're paying these people to habitually perform practices they've committed to following through on doing. They've made promises to do certain things. At the point that you've secured enough people and those skill sets on a reliable basis, and you are paying them on the fulfillment of those promises, or let's say that they were volunteers and eventually they prove themselves reliable. At that point that you can then take that for granted, that's when the community is able to say, the value is here. We have the value to be able to now do these other things that we weren't able to do before. Now we can do a summer camp. We couldn't have done a summer camp before because we did not have the human means. We did not have the commitments and the follow through on that kind of time energy.
Okay, so I keep talking about this thing, time energy. Okay, so I have like a symbol for it. It's really cool. I always talk about it, I always use it, but this symbol is one you've never seen before. It's better. It's Tim energy.
These are just some thoughts. Some preliminary thoughts on future essays and on a lot of things. A lot of things I'm working on right now. And I just want to get it out there in this rough form because time energy is a really important concept and I've seen it being used, which is awesome. But we have to think about it, time with the potential for repetition plus energy. And that potential for repetition is worthless without promises and follow through. And typically the only people who are actually taking that promise to the bank are going to be these capitalists. When it comes to organizing, trying to organize outside of capitalism, your value is not just showing up. That is not labor. Labor is not just showing up. Labor power is what matters. Labor power, its potential to calculate and plan towards the future. Planning the future requires promises. Evaluate yourself and think about this. Okay, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Who do you make promises to in a year? How many of those are based around a profit motive? Are you only following through on promises to bosses? What about promises to communities? Do you have communities? Do you have people where you live who rely on you in any way that builds something that benefits the community in general? This could be like, you work at a soup kitchen every Wednesday. Eventually, you've really added value to that community after a year, and they know what your time, energy, commitments actually are worth. They say, wow, this person's put in they've put in sustained effort on a routine basis. They've followed through on their promises. They've actually helped us build this organization. This is actually really useful. But you can't tell right off the bat. You can't tell because if you were to pull out, if you were to stop coming through on your promises, it could throw a wrench into the whole operations of the organization. It could botch the whole thing. You and the value you bring in a year could all be undermined by how you stop coming, and maybe you say that you'll come back and then you don't, and this is just like, it lowers the morale of everybody else. There is a power in promises. There's a power in making promises, and there's a power in following through on promises. Trust is built through following through on promises. Are you only building trust with capitalists? Are you putting capitalists before community? Are you putting capitalists before developing your own personal talents? Are you putting capitalists before friends and family? Ideology is where you say you're for capitalism, you're against capitalism, you think capitalism only works within certain regions and it doesn't within others. Whatever it is, you think it's not working out right now, it could be reformed. You think it isn't working out right now, you don't think it could be reformed. Whatever. That's ideology. That's at the level of ideas. At the material basis though, who are you making promises to, and are you following through in the real fucking world? The fruit of your time spent on this earth is the only measure of what you actually stand for. So challenge yourself. Think about it. Because we're all getting screwed. Much love.
Please subscribe. I need subscribers. I don't know where I'm gonna go if I don't have subscribers. What am I gonna have to get a job?
I'm trying!
Like, follow, subscribe.